Good evening and Happy New Year and welcome to the fourth quarter Roanoke Division Town Hall for 2024. I'm Bill Marine, Vice Director of the Roanoke Division, and I want to welcome you to these quarterly video conferences where we get to share with you, members of ARRL in the 4 states of the Roanoke Division, things that are going on, issues of importance to you and ham radio in the region, and a chance to learn a little bit more about special things that go on in amateur radio in our community. Let's meet our regulars for tonight, your ARRL elected officials that represent you. Brad Humphreys, AE4VJ, is our producer tonight. Brad, thank you very much for bringing it up tonight. Good to have you on board. Thank you. All right, let's meet our director of the Roanoke Division, Dr. Jim Boner, N2ZZ. Jim, good evening to you.
Good evening to you, and thank you again for being the MC for this.
My pleasure. And we have our 4 section managers of the 4 states in the Roanoke Division. Let's bring them on up. We have somebody with a relatively new face. It's Matthew Crook, W1MRC, the South Carolina section manager. Matthew, good evening and Happy New Year. Welcome aboard.
Good evening. Thank you.
We also have with us North Carolina section manager, Marv Hoffman, WA4NC. Marv, good evening to you.
Hello, Bill and the group. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. We also have with us tonight Jack Smith, KE4LWT, the Virginia section manager. Good evening, Jack, and Happy New Year to you.
Thank you, and Happy New Year to you and everyone out there in StreamYard land.
And last but not least, our West Virginia section manager, Dan Ringer, K8WV. Dan is having a little bit of a connection problem this evening, but we'll make sure we get him in here. There you are. Good to have you aboard, Dan. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm only getting about 30% of what is going on.
Well, that's okay. That's kind of the rest of us in the nation as a whole, Dan, so don't worry. And also, we have a special guest this evening. It's ARRL's Director of Emergency Management, Josh Johnston, KE5MHV, coming to us from Connecticut, where ARRL's headquarters is located. Josh, thanks for making time here in the holiday season to join us here in the Roanoke Division Town Hall.
Well, thanks for having me, and glad to be here tonight.
Thanks very much. Josh, I know you've got another commitment at 8:30 tonight with another ham radio organization, so I'm going to just spend some time with you if I can, and let's find out tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you come to ARRL.
All right. Well, thank you. And first of all, it's a great night to be here because this is actually 3rd year anniversary of my hire date at ARRL. December 30th of 2021 was when I officially came on board. It's good to be here. As you guys might already have picked out, I'm not a native New Englander. Not originally from Connecticut. I'm from small town in Arkansas. Was involved in emergency management, emergency response for 31 years before coming to ARRL. And in a nutshell, one of the things that made me want to come here was without a doubt COVID. Now it really wasn't. Although I had served the entire time as a county emergency manager during COVID. So definitely a trying time from our standpoint. But my background, amateur extra, was one of the first communications unit leaders for the state of Arkansas, Oxcom certified in Arkansas, was on the communications unit working group in Arkansas, and very actively involved with our state's ComU and our state communications organizations as a county emergency manager. So communications was kind of my niche. We had some people that were really big on wildland fire, which was kind of my number 2 thing that I was pretty high on. But I came from more of a fire background. I had worked a little bit in law enforcement, but fire was really my primary background. And but comms, I was the guy that if somebody had a question about radios or that kind of stuff, I was the guy they called and came to and called. When this position came open at ARRL, some of you and I have already had this conversation. I knew there were some things that needed to improve with our program. I was already also serving as an EC for ARRL in Arkansas in my local county. So I was kind of serving as the dual role, primarily doing the paperwork. Back in those days, we had a thing with ARRL that some of you may remember. It was called Aries Connect, and I was the local point of contact. Was the local EC that was doing our reporting for the local county, but I was also the county EMA director. So I saw a need, saw an opportunity, and thought this was a way to get involved and put my money where my mouth is, so to speak, and try to see if we can make a difference and take a strong organization that I still feel very passionate about, and see if we can work to improve our MCOM program at ARRL. So that's kind of my background, and in the maybe not so short version, but that's kind of the background.
Well, thanks for sharing that. What was your biggest challenge when you became ARRL's emergency management director?
While we had challenges, it was not. I think the biggest challenge is understanding the needs nationwide, and trying to build a program that works at the local level nationally. So I think what we've taken is the approach of let's build a training and education program that can help people get better training, and then advocate for our local ARES groups and MCOM groups around the country to serve their local organizations. And there's, whether it be served agency, whether it be, whatever served agency, whether it be a government agency or public service group or MCOM group or Red Cross or whoever it may be. We've had some conversations with some disaster relief organizations that are completely off the wall, but I think a great fit, possibly for us to be able to provide some assistance in the future. And that's one of the things at the national level that we're trying to do is provide opportunities for hams at the local level to provide assistance during times of disaster.
Can you give us an overview of some of the changes in ARES since you've taken over?
Well, I think the biggest changes is we've tried to make improvements to what training we have. And we're still not there yet, but we're still, it's a moving thing. And I think we're still working to some end game finishes. We've got another course that we had originally hoped to roll out this past summer. It's been put on hold. I was actually saying by summer of 25, but because of some things going on with some federal course updates, we may hold that out because this advanced course that we have yet to do may be done and built and have some content in it that will complement or add to especially the technical side of some of the new training that may be coming down from the federal government for auxiliary communicators.
And that raises the question. We hear a lot about OXCOM standards. How do they fit with ARES? And I see that somebody came up with a question about that third level of training. I think you just answered that.
Yep. Right now, I can't give you a date. Gina, I don't have a great update because we still think by the end of this of 2025, but it may be farther closer to the end. But part of that is because we're holding off a little bit until we can get that some more information on the updates to the auxiliary communicator courses that are coming out from CISA.
And is that related to the question I just asked, Josh, that we hear about Oxcom standards and how are they meshing with ARRLs?
Well, I think they mesh, but they more complement. One of the things that is being discussed, and I'm on a working group, and actually Tom Brown, who probably may be in here tonight also, is on that working group as well. And then Brian Falvey, I believe, is on here tonight. Earlier, I heard from him earlier that he was going to be on here. Both of them, Brian's not on that working group, but we work with Brian also at CISA. But there's going to be some possible updates, and I don't have all the information and on that with what they're doing in that working group and in that course with updates to those courses. So that's the reason that we're a little bit. We want to improve that mesh, so to speak, if you want to call it a mesh.
Since you've come on board, there have been two major alignments of ARRL. One is a memorandum of agreement with FEMA, and the other is a role for ARRL with SafeCom. Could you tell us a little bit about both and how they're reshaping the program?
Sure. The FEMA MOA was one that we had in place previously. It's with ESF 6, which those of you that is to provide assistance for long-term sheltering. And that's where our role at this point sets with FEMA. And I've had people ask me, well, why is it not with ESF 2? Well, FEMA is not the lead agency for the federal government for ESF 2. CISA is the lead ESF 2 agency for the federal government. So that's the reason that this MOA exists where it does with FEMA. That whole situation, who knows? With new administration coming in, that some of that stuff may be changing too. We don't know at this point, but that's been one major. The other big thing that I was familiar with SafeCom before I came here, and it was an organization or a collaboration group that CISA that's actually mandated by Congress, that CISA uses as a working group or as an advisory group. And it's comprised of individuals and organizations from all over the country that come together and make recommendations and set some potential guidelines or works with CISA in their ECD, which is their Emergency Communications Division, for roles, responsibilities, and tasks that CISA may be looking at doing. And I knew we had a potential role. While there are several HAMs and even ARRL members who are both employees of CISA, FEMA, and others, we didn't have a seat at that table. And I started working trying to find our way to that seat. And we submitted the application. And luckily, one of the strong people that really got by our side and was an advocate for us coming on, there were two individuals particularly, J.M. Rowe, who's the section emergency coordinator from Arkansas, who obviously I knew very well, is on CISA, and he was the one that I kind of initially went to and said, hey, I'd like to be involved. The second one was retired Chief Jay Kopstein from NYPD, who had great relationships with HAMs in the city of New York, both before and after 9/11. And honestly, he built his relationship through the marathons. The work in the New York City Marathon with his amateur radio team once 9/11, and he was working communications division. When 9/11 happened, he knew that the hams were something he needed to get involved right away. And so he was actually a huge advocate for us and has actually been our senior point of contact coming on to SafeCom. So we can thank Jay Kopstein and JM both for their assistance in bringing us on board and being an advocate for us.
That's great news. I'd like to move to a little more a regional focus. Inland and the mountainous areas of the Carolinas and Virginia are usually not places that are subject to hurricane-related disasters. And yet, as you know, we had a tremendous impact from Hurricane Helene in September. From your vantage point, at this stage, a few months after, have you observed anything that you'd like to comment on about the Hurricane Helene amateur radio response?
Well, first of all, you all know more than I do that what we saw during Helene was unprecedented. And the overall response was phenomenal. I had regular conversations, particularly with Tom in North Carolina, and value his input and our conversations that we had. And knowing through SafeCom, knowing Greg Hauser, who's their SWIC in North Carolina, and knowing the relationship that he and Tom had, I knew from the public safety side, they had things handled. So we didn't have to worry about that side of it. I was also getting information, particularly from Tennessee, a little bit from South Carolina. I honestly didn't have as much contact with South Carolina, and that's probably on me. And for that, I, apologize. Problem was I got busy with everybody else. I was getting less information of quite as catastrophic damage in South Carolina, even though I know there was a lot of damage as well. But keep in mind, at the same time, I was also having correspondence with people in Florida that were dealing with some situations, nowhere near as catastrophic as what you all were. But Helene, to me, if anything, reminded us that while the old phrase, when all else fails, is not our first priority these days in the new era of technology, we can't completely turn our backs on it either. And health and welfare traffic became the number one requested need in and out of North Carolina and Tennessee, especially, that we were getting comments, requests, emails, so on and so forth on. So it just reminds us, to me, that we still need, while yes, in most cases, it's going to be that served agency, that public safety organization that we're working with, that we need to focus on probably 80% of the time. We need to keep that thought of, when all else fails, we need to be able to provide that last mile communications as much as anything. And to be able to let family know, and we had some folks in the Carolinas, especially in Tennessee, that stepped up. I've had countless calls, emails, everything of the work that was done on the one repeater there, that primarily 2-meter traffic of all the great things that was done, all the traffic, family welfare messages and so forth that were handled in and out of there. And kudos to everyone that was involved in that. So
Thanks.
Anyway,
let me do a quick round with our panelists and see if any of them have any questions for you, because I know you've got just a few more minutes before you have to go to your next call. Any questions from our section managers at all for Josh, or comments? All right, Josh, a quick takeaway before you go, and that is what message would you like our members to take away about the state of amateur radio emergency communications?
well, the the safest one I can, not the safest, but the best one I can give you right now is don't forget that HF's not dead. And there are times, matter of fact, one of our presentations at SafeCom recently was about the value of HF radio. And this was coming from a SWIC who they actually keep HF public safety frequencies licensed in their state and use it on a daily basis. So he not only was talking about the amateur bands, but he emphasized that HF is still a very valuable source if you're willing to use it. But I guess my other key takeaway is the more we work together, the more we communicate and cooperate with each other. It's all about building relationships and improving communications. And whether we're improving it and building those relationships with ourselves, among our own organization, or with those served agencies or those people and communities that we serve, we've got to be building relationships. And I've said before, sometimes as communicators, we are not necessarily great communicators. And I think that's one of the areas that is one of my goals to try to help us improve on. And it's an area, honestly, that I have to improve on, that I continue to remind myself to build on daily is you've got to be willing to have these conversations, just like even we're having tonight, to build and grow and continue to move and improve. But you've got to build those relationships ahead of, you folks that have been through what y'all have been through in the last year. You're probably at really good opportunities right now because you've got people that have heard about amateur radio and how well it worked. And you've got the opportunities right now to build those relationships and say, and I think that's the other thing we need to remember to do is come with almost a servant's heart, so to speak, of what can we do to help you guys? And then here's something else we might be able to do with this help, but come to it with a questioning and not submissive attitude, but with an attitude of, we're listening. What can we do to provide service for you? And have you thought about this? It never hurts to offer. They may not know that we've got WinLink capability, for instance. But come to a public service agency, especially, or any served agency we're going to, with is there anything we could do to help you? What could we do? So,
good advice, and good advice to end off the year. I see we have a question from Steve McAtee. Is there a way for ARRL to be activated without a served agency request?
Well, Steve, the short answer to that is really no. I say that so we never want anyone to self-deploy. You should never self-deploy, but the served agency doesn't necessarily have to be a governmental organization. We had lots of hams that were active in the Carolinas and Tennessee that weren't there as hams. They were there with Southern Baptist Men's Group, or they were there with other organizations that, because they were hams and they brought equipment with them, they activated out of necessity. So my recommendation would be get plugged in with someone, either through ARRL or through one of these other organizations, to be involved and be active.
Okay. And Brian, this says, don't wait until the day of the emergency.
Exactly right.
Business cards. Yep.
And Brian's one of our cohorts and counter partners at CISA. And Brian and I actually, anyone that was at Dayton, Brian co-presented with me at Dayton on importance of building relationships in amateur radio and in MCOM. And that's exactly what we were talking about, is building those relationships ahead of time.
Josh, I know you have to go to another event, and I want to thank you on behalf of everybody this evening in the Roanoke division for taking the time to bring us up to speed on your role and what's new in amateur radio emergency communications at ARRL. We wish you and your family and staff the happiest of New Year's ahead.
Thanks, and glad to be here. Reach out to us anytime. The best way, really, and the easiest to remember is Aries at ARRL.org. Feel free. Thank y'all.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Josh Johnson, KE5MHV. Josh, Happy New Year and thanks for being with us.
Thanks for all you do, guys.
All right. I wish Josh could stay a little longer. He has another obligation this evening, but that brings us now to when we have a round robin. We hear from our 4 section managers and what's going on in their respective states, the 4 states that make up the Roanoke division of ARRL. Let's start with, if we can, this evening with Dan Ringer, K8WV, West Virginia section manager. Dan, what news do you bring from the Mountaineer State? Dan is having, I think, a little bit of internet trouble tonight. So let's move, if we can, over to Jack Smith, KE4LWT in Virginia. Jack, what's new in the Commonwealth this evening?
Well, fortunately, things went pretty well during Hurricane Helene. By the way, Hurricane Helene hit 55 years almost to the week after Hurricane Camille. And the same counties that were affected for Hurricane Camille in 1969 were those that were affected in Virginia, including Nelson County, which, for those of you who are familiar, took the brunt of the damage during Hurricane Camille, and actually suffered quite a bit of same thing, flash flooding as them. And as Josh mentioned, VHF 2-meter FM rules the day in the field supporting the emergency management agencies. But the one thing that I always hear mentioned is training. And so training, communications, communications is in every AAR I have ever read as being a challenge. But without the training to go with that, that's a big problem. So, we're seeing a big uptick in that. And I'm very proud to see people here in the Commonwealth taking that to heart and really doing what they can to make it work. We were asked to participate in the day, actually it's twice daily conference call with VDEM, which is the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, and the VOAD organization, which is the Voluntary Organizations Active in Disasters, for the first about 3.5, 4 weeks from the 25th of September, which is when the state declared a state of emergency, up until about the 20th of October. The biggest things we have going are, of course, the upcoming Hamfest calendar. So far, we only have 2, and we have a great need for someone to step up and be the section convention. We don't have that yet, but there's still plenty of time. But remember, for those that are with the clubs, the sooner you get that out, the more likely it is to get advertised in QST and on the ARRL website. So please get your requests in as quick as you can. Plus, it allows me to schedule time to be able to go to those. As most of you probably know, I'm an emergency manager by trade, and this year I spent 185. I just looked up a little while ago. 185 days out of 365. So just a couple of days more than half. But the agency I work for allows me to schedule going to things like these ARRL conventions so that I can push the amateur radio message, which also is an indicator of how much the agency looks at the value of amateur radio. So look forward to seeing as many of you as I can in person. And let's get out there and spread the word. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Jack, and always a delight to have you on board. And Happy New Year, and thanks for that report from the Old Dominion State. Let's move over to South Carolina. Matthew, W1MRC, congratulations on your election as section manager of South Carolina. And I know that South Carolina was in a bit of the crosshairs from Hurricane Helene. What would you like to tell everyone about what's going on in the Palmetto State?
Oh, good evening, everyone. And yeah, definitely thank everyone that took the time to vote. I don't know if you can see from this image, if it looks like I'm in a vehicle, funny story, I am in a vehicle. Apologies, left the birthday dinner a little bit early to make sure I made this event tonight. And yeah, post Helene, for us, the 2015 floods was kind of the biggest thing a lot of us remembered more recently, unless you go all the way back to Hugo. But as far as the Midlands and the Georgia side of the state, the Helene was very different. I know Dr. Jim, he could speak on some of that as well, being Aiken saw a good bit of it. And then, of course, in the upstate, on the Saturday immediately following the Friday event when it went through, I was fortunate enough to go to the state EMD, work in the radio room there with some of the guys, and we were monitoring the SE Heart repeaters. We on HF. I know the North Carolina had HF net going, so we were checking in there with them as well. Any health and welfare messages we could pass. Fortunately, in our state, we weren't really seeing any, emergency needs, of threats to life or safety. At least not especially that Saturday when I was there. But the communications manager for the state, one thing he brought up was, hey, for us to put out on the statewide SE Heart system, if anybody saw any gas stations that were open with power and had gas, to let us know, or if they had food or they had ice, because those were the main necessities people were looking for at that time. And, so we put the call out, and of course, a lot of hams that were out and about, especially up the upstate, Anderson, Greenville, that way, they were letting us know, hey, this station, they're open. And they don't have maybe the data to take credit cards or debit cards, or they could take cash, or maybe they didn't have power, so they couldn't get gas, but they did have food available. And they'd update us that, hey, this one's now out of gas. But that was to both help any citizens that were listening, as well as the first responders who were in the area working, also needing gas and supplies. So that was kind of, I think, how Josh mentioned, find ways to help. That was something in my past normally we had not done, but it was helpful. I know those at the state EMD were appreciative of the information we were able to get. But yeah, definitely it was an unexpected event. I know a lot of us was kind of looking towards Atlanta, so when it came in as close as it did, very interesting for sure, but a lot of good ham activity. And speaking of upcoming events, I know we were talking, like Jack just mentioned, the Ham Fest. I know we've got a few coming up. I'm glad to mention Greenwood, the Gars Fest, is January the 11th. They are back, changed locations, a new location. They did not hold one, this year, 2024, but they're back next year, January 11th, 2025. So definitely look up Gars Fest, Greenwood Amateur Radio Society Ham Fest. Make it out if you can. I'll be there. I believe Dr. Jim's going to be there with me as well. Then coming up in April, we'll have the Ridge Tailgate Party, Batesburg, Leesville for the Ridge Amateur Radio Club. April 5th, April 26th, the Columbia Amateur Radio Club is going to be having their same location as last year, down near the Lexington Calhoun County line. I don't have any specifics yet, but I've heard rumors that one of our coastal clubs is going to be having one in April as well. So as soon as I find any information out on that, I'll get that out. And while, like Bill had mentioned earlier, the emails, I'll be able to go out. Do check the ARRL SC website. I'm posting the section manager report on there, and any information we have, events, everything's on there. So until we're getting the email blast going again, that's going to be the best place to get information for South Carolina.
Excellent. Thanks for that overview and report, Matthew. And thanks for taking time out from your son's birthday party to join us tonight. That's very special. As a December baby myself, tell your son happy birthday.
Will do.
I
Thank
get
you.
that very much. Yeah. And then Marv, I know that the North Carolina section had the biggest response to the damage done by Hurricane Helene. And it's good to see you. And I regret to report to everybody that you yourself had some personal damage done that you had to attend to too. So can you give us an overview of what's going on in the Tar Heel state?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to report to the group about Hurricane Helene. It was a very interesting situation, and obviously more than interesting because it was devastating to thousands of people. So I don't want to make it sound like it was a communications exercise, but it was a communications problem that had to be overcome. Now, first, I would say that I have identified personal goals for the North Carolina section for 2025. We will be working with emergency management. We'll be working with local county emergency managers to try to encourage them to incorporate more communications alternatives. As some of you know, the Viper system, which is a trunked 700, 800 megahertz system that has 240 towers across the state, very robust, and that stayed operational with the exception of 6 sites. Now, when you need a site and you don't have that site, that's a problem. One site went down because a microwave dish was blown out of alignment, and then that affected the stations downstream from that microwave site. So they were in what's called site trunking. They continued to operate, but one of the hugest problems of this storm was road access. And some of you may know that I-40 from the eastern Continental Divide near Black Mountain, between Marion and Black Mountain, was blocked, and that caused huge problems as far as getting resources into the most severely affected areas. So what we're going to be working on in 2025 is reaching out to the local emergency managers to encourage them to add in more HF stations in their EOCs, more VHF, UHF stations in their EOCs, including more WinLink stations. The WinLink system operated flawlessly from the regional coordinating centers and the counties that were in communication with the regional coordinating centers and the state EOC. Those sites were staffed for, I want to say, 5 days continuously, and that was very successful. One of the things we've done in the western third of the state is the owners of DMR repeaters have voluntarily cooperated, and we have them linked together, both on a scheduled net every Tuesday night at 8 p.m., as well as the ability to link them anytime that is needed. There are 5 people presently, and 3 of the 18 stations have the capability to use by pushing one button to activate those 18 DMR stations and have them available at a moment's notice. We're going to add several more DMR stations and several more Oxcom persons who have the ability to activate that system. One of the things we've tried to do is to make sure, to the extent possible, that we have multiple sites that particular counties can reach, so that if there is a failure in the local area, they would have communications with the next 2 closest counties and have an alternative means of communicating. Now, without going on about the infrastructure, I'm going to mention that there were some lessons learned for hams that I'm going to be emphasizing during 2025. everybody ought to have an iPhone charger in their car, and not everybody does until they need one. That gave lots of people the ability to communicate through a local McDonald's or whatever, to charge their phones and to have Wi-Fi access. So we're going to emphasize that. Another thing that we're going to be emphasizing is having people consider, if not a solar installation for their own station, then at least to have some sort of small Honda generator so that they could operate as needed, when needed, without having to have the difficulty of getting fuel. Having a small generator that has enough power, not necessarily to run the whole house, but to keep their communications going, I think would be a very important thing. And we're going to stress that during 2025, excuse me. So WinLink, DMR, HF, VHF, and having more local hams reach out to the local EM and do what Josh said just a few moments ago. We'd like to help. How can we help you? What would you like us to do? And if we can get that message to the EM people without sometimes, unfortunately, telling the EM people, well, you don't have what you need because you've got this very expensive equipment and it doesn't work and the cell system doesn't work and we're the only people that can help you. That's not the message to send to people. That's what we're going to be working on in 2025. That's the North Carolina report.
Very good, Marv. Thank you so much. And a tip of the hat to you and Jack and to Matthew for all the hams in your respective sections for how they responded, whether through ESF2, ESF6, or health and welfare. It was just the reason was terrible, but just a magnificent turnout of resources. So a tip of the hat to all of you. Before I turn it over to Dr. Jim, our director, for comments, I just want to put some things and mention coming up. For those of you who are wondering where things stand with the ARRL system disruption from last May, there was an update posted this past Friday on ARRL's website with the largest outstanding member benefit still trying to be resolved is DXCC and DX related applications. Those are being entered manually and will probably be March before that is caught up. And then a reminder, because we won't have another one of these town halls until the end of March, we have our annual state QSO parties coming up. We have South Carolina and North Carolina together, the Carolinas on the weekend of February 22nd and 23rd. South Carolina on Saturday, the 22nd of February, North Carolina on Sunday, February 23rd. And then we've got Virginia having its annual QSO party on the weekend of March 15th and 16th. And the HamFest calendar is now back up and fully functional on the website. We have one convention status HamFest coming up in the entire division. That's RARS Fest, the Raleigh Amateur Radio HamFest on Saturday, April 5th. We have three large HamFests, but they're not sanctioned as conventions. But we have Charleston, West Virginia on Saturday, March 1st. We have the Charlotte HamFest on Friday, March 7th and Saturday, March 8th. And we have Winterfest in Vienna, Virginia on Sunday, March 9th. And before I turn it over to Jim, nominations will be coming up very soon for the annual Roanoke Division Service Award. Last year, we had an outstanding winner, Mackenzie Denton, a very impressive young lady, KO4GLN. So that will be available and live on the Roanoke Division website, ARRL-Roanoke.org or COM, starting after January 1st. And we'll put an announcement out about it. If you know someone very deserving of recognition for their contributions to amateur radio as a whole, and especially to the Roanoke Division, please nominate that individual. This award goes back to 1968, and it's a very prestigious award, and it's always an honor to find that hidden talent in our area. We have a question before we go to Dr. Jim from Roger Bell. How many NCOM groups were used for the first 2 weeks in North Carolina? Marv, do you happen to know the answer to that?
I know that Oxcom and ARRLs were activated in a number of locations. I can't give you how many different groups might have been activated at one time or another, but on Wednesday, before the storm struck, resources were mobilized in North Carolina. There's a warehouse that was near Conover, and Army vehicles, ambulances, police cars, fuel trucks, medical people, comms people, a tremendous amount of resources were stockpiled for movement into the affected areas as soon as DOT could open the roads. Starlink brought in 500 Starlink devices and located them across Western North Carolina and sent people to set them up. So it's hard for me to pinpoint the exact number of MCOM groups because there were different types and they were in different locations.
Okay. Hey, thank you, Marv, for addressing that. Jim, you're the anchor guy tonight on this relay team. This is Dr. Jim Boner, N2ZZ, Director of the Roanoke Division. I know you have some year-end thoughts that you'd like to share with the members of the division.
Certainly. First, I'm going to mention a couple of things. One is my high-definition webcam is not helping my face, but I became a dermatology project, and I'm in the healing phase, I hope. The second part is that Matthew had told you about South Carolina, and I can tell you I've been in this area since '82 in Augusta, Georgia, and over here in Aiken, South Carolina, 1986, and this is the worst storm that we've had. We did not have the property damage. We did not have car damage, anything. However, we lost power for 12 days. And I'm going to tell a story that I love to tell, because in April, I decided I was going to get a generator. And I got the biggest generator they had from Harbor Freight, a tri-fuel. And I got that same look from my wife, as we all look whenever we buy something they don't think is necessary. But when the storm happened, we lost power for 12 days. And because the tri-fuel I was able to use it on natural gas, so we survived, and we did really, really well until the power crews came and restored power. And I called Matthew and I said, Matthew, anything going on in Columbia? Can't remember, whatever. And Lexington, that's it. And he was saying, well, the only problem we have, everyone from Aiken's coming and stealing our gas. So now we have a shortage. I said, we're nothing if not resourceful. So I have a message here. I try to be very positive all the time about things related with the ARRL. A quick thing, I started in 1969. I became an associate member even before I became a licensed member of the ARRL. I ended up getting life membership when I was young as a birthday or Christmas gift. I can't remember. And then fast forward to coming down from central New York down to Augusta and then Aiken. And then in 2000, I decided I really didn't like the way things were going on in the South Carolina section. And speaking at field day to one of my friends, they said, well, why don't you do something? You've got the personality, run for section manager. So I did. I eventually got there in 2003, lost the first election, but ended up staying as section manager until 2010, then became vice director. 2015, my director, who is Dennis Bodson, who sadly is a silent key right now, had decided to retire. And I had the opportunity to pick the best person that I had worked with as a vice director. And you're looking at him now, Bill Marine. And he has continued on with the league since that time. I came to a kind of a dead stop because I lost an election in 2019, and I was off the board for 3 years, and Bill was still on there, and think he called me every Monday just to see how I was doing, because that was a tough time. And then came back in election and came back on the board. So I'm telling you this story, or telling you that story to tell you this. I'm a real believer in the league. I may not agree with everything that the league does or has done, but I support the league, and I think everybody on this panel feels the same way. We are volunteers. We're not paid for our services. It's all as a volunteer effort. So one of the things that I've just noticed going on is that I see a lot of negative ARRL things going on, and just I was on one of the sideband nets and heard someone speak bad about the league. I went back to them and answered some questions. They said they just didn't want to hear it. Social media, there's been a lot of negative things, and it really hurts to see this. I mean, everybody here puts in their time. I feel I've put in my time, and trying to make the league a better place. Each of the section managers are in charge of their section, and as far as the director, I'm one of 15, and the only real to make change is to have 8 people vote in the same favor as I do. And Bill Marine is of course the vice director and the backup. But if you just take away everything else the league does, the one thing that the league does that's incredibly important is that we're the barrier between our frequencies being auctioned off. We kind of have a block on that. We've done a lot of things, but as time goes on, the numbers of hams are coming down. We are trying to backfill and get new members in. We've got Steve Goodgame at the league doing Teachers Institute, trying to bring in new hams. I was very happy during field day to see a number of places that are just bringing in younger hams, YLs, and the rest. But we need a little help. We need some positive talk about the ARRL, and not to be afraid about talking about the ARRL. Again, it's never going to do everything perfect, but we really need to support it. So the importance that comes out of this is that with less members, we have less money to be able to do programs. We have less numbers to have any sort of political influence. The league has only about 20% of licensed hams, and we need to do better. We need to do better. We need to have clubs kind of work at and getting members. You do get a few perks for getting members through the club. And Mike, WAHZ, who is the VAACC, had sent me an email saying that in Virginia, 2 hams dropping out for each ham that joins. So I'm just concerned about projections. I really want the league to really move in things. And, well, we have it here. How's the league's efforts of recruiting youth in the hobby, the measure of success? I don't have the numbers, Mike. I think it's different in every state, but when we dealing with younger members, we are dealing with a lot of other things that they could be doing. So we need Elmers, we need mentors, we need people to really work on it. The league basically is saying, look, we're going to do Teachers Institutes. We are going to try to get more youth into the hobby by doing it that way, and then offering support online to help. All of us had our Elmers and mentors growing up, but it's a different world. We don't see that as much. We tend not to be a joining society, so we've got a lot to do, and we need help. I'm very happy to hear any suggestions as they come up, but the league's working on it. We have another group, perhaps recently retired people. They have a little bit of money in the pocket. They can go ahead and move along and add to our numbers as well. So as far as suggestions, I think we just said that. Enjoy and basically encourage membership in ARRL, club support, and also one of the things I said is that it was a real good deal for me when I got to life membership. But as soon as I got on the board and saw what sort of financial things they were dealing with, this is back when I was a vice director in 2010, I decided to become a member of the Diamond Club, which is a donation to the league And right at this point, I'm a member of that, and Bill's actually a member of the Maxim Society, which is one of the higher giver societies. So I encourage everyone to just look at that. By doing the donations, you do get some perks, and of course, membership's very important. The numbers are very important. So I just want to end this saying that please be positive for the league. If you hear something negative, please see what you can do about kind of encouraging them to be more proactive in seeing what the league does. And we're always around to kind of help if you need that help. So, Bill, do you have any more comments on that?
As Steve Goodgame, the director of education at ARRL, says, if not ARRL, then who? And we have seen in the last year the unfortunate demise of CQ as an alternate voice for ARRL, which actually was very helpful in pointing out and giving some competitive spirit. But if the league goes away, then what organization is there to advocate on behalf of amateur radio and the frequencies? Tonight we heard from Josh that HF is now has a resurgence of appeal, and Marv echoed that also. I could see a lot of HF frequencies disappearing if we don't continue advocating for that. But that's it for here. Do stay positive. It's as Jim said, everybody you see on the screen right now is a volunteer, and we try to represent you and amateur radio the best we can. But not only do we need your support to do that, we need your encouragement. And negativity is unfortunately a little more prevalent than we'd like, and I think we all need to take a more positive attitude. Enough, I think, for the lecture and the comments tonight, Jim. We'll move on, and we're at the top of the hour. So let's just all say Happy New Year to everybody. And it's time for us to move on out. We'll be back towards the end of March with another quarterly town hall. Look for our newsletters. And again, think about nominees for the upcoming Roanoke Division Service Award. Happy New Year, everybody, and take care. See you all in 2025.